Your Creative Push, episode 284.
The only thing that matters really is to do what you really want to do. Life takes care of the rest, somehow.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Kahn Muftic. Kahn is a concept artist who's worked on movies like Godzilla, Annihilation, and The Mummy, and his newest project, Kiss Me First, gave him his directorial debut as the animation director, and he comes on the show today to talk about its upcoming release and the gambit of emotions that he experienced during the 2-year project. Kahn talks about his very early interest in wanting to become a zoologist and then his decision to become an artist instead. He talks about discovering concept art and the terrifying decision, once he did discover concept art, to leave the stability of his current work in order to learn a new way of approaching art. And he goes further to explain why it's your interest in a thing that will lead to your eventual success in that thing, because your interest in it is what ensures that you're going to have the motivation to keep learning and to keep working hard. Kahn talks about how he approached the idea of being the leader of a large creative team for Kiss Me First, and having to push past many resistances, such as the fact that actors and writers are the ones that are usually given directorial roles without question, while traditional artists like him are doubted. And as such, he talks about some of those moments of extreme self-doubt and his practice of mindfulness and how it helped him to get through that rigorous 2-year project. And not only did it help him get through that project, but he was also able to take on another project. He completed a book during this, the busiest 2 years of his life. Finally, Kahn goes on to talk about realizing the value of being able to communicate through your drawing, a conversation that he had with Ridley Scott, and also the experience of working with Netflix and what really surprised him about working with that company. Just a very humbling episode from a very thoughtful guy who really opened up during this episode to share some of his struggles, tackling some of his own inner demons, and of course, how you can as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my very inspiring episode with Kahn Muftic. Kahn, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I know you have been very busy boy the past months and years. So I really like to get into your new project, what you've just accomplished, because I'm very excited about it because I get to actually consume it very soon, which I'm very excited about. But before we get into that, I was hoping maybe you could give us a little bit of your backstory, sort of how you got to the point you are today, creatively speaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'm going to do my best to be really short with this because I had quite a colorful life and history, if I may say so. And not in the sense I wasn't a criminal or anything, but it was just I had a very sort of different things that happened that took me into different countries and different kind of life situations. So the best way to do this, I think, is if I say that when I was very young, I actually wanted to be a zoologist. Zoologist or a ninja. And because ninja plan didn't work, I was drawing a lot because I was interested in animals. And then once the time came to kind of decide which path to take, I chose art because I thought that zoology is quite a bit of a lot to take on. It's a lot of learning. And I was, 13, 14. I was just, overwhelmed by my hormones. So I couldn't focus for the love of me, and then just picked art. And eventually, from there, I finished the art school then in Switzerland, where I moved to in the 90s. And after that, somehow slipped into advertising, doing motion graphics and graphic design. And I would occasionally do a very terrible music video or even a worse commercial for, I don't know, a shopping center in Bosnia where I'm coming from, something like that. Mm-hmm. And doing all these things really didn't hit the mark for me emotionally and creatively. I didn't feel like this was a thing. And then in 2005 or six, I kind of discovered concept art and CG talk forums, and that was like a massive revelation for me. And I was just completely obsessed with the idea of getting into that and doing concept art for a living. So I quit my job, and for a year I just practiced straight on. I had to completely start again because my traditional art education wasn't really best suited for a job in the games industry, because most of it was from imagination, most of it was design-based work, and if you do sort of traditional Eastern European School of Art, it's not necessarily the kind of set of skills you're equipped with once you finish the school. So I did, and eventually I got a job in games industry in UK and worked in games for about 7 years. And then from games, I somehow transferred into films, worked in films for about 4 years or so. And then I was like, okay, now I'm ready to go back to directing. And I felt really empowered by the experience of over a decade of working as a concept artist and illustrator, because that's something that I felt I was really missing before I could become really serious about directing. And that was about 2 years ago. So I started writing some stuff, ideas, projects that I want to do. And I just started advertising myself as a director as well, not just as a concept artist. And obviously, most people laughed at that idea. However, some of them didn't. And I started talking to people at Access Animation who put me through for a director role on this project called Kiss Me First. And it's a Channel 4 and Netflix series. And they were looking for an animation director. So obviously I took that in, and it was an all-consuming 2-year experience that I'm finally out of now and I can talk about. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up where I am right now.
Very cool. And I wanted to go back to when you're making music videos and commercials, and you're saying how that it didn't kind of hit the mark emotionally for you or creatively for you. And then you get put onto concept art and you see like it does excite you, and you do see the potential in it. And you realize that, I need to make a change, or you kind of see that maybe I should quit what I'm doing now, what's being successful for me now, to do this thing that really is kind of pulling at me and tugging at me. I feel like a lot of people get that. They realize that they want to do this thing, right? But they are so scared of leaving the stability of the thing, even though it isn't hitting the mark emotionally for you. So my question is, like, how long of a back and forth period was it for you when you kind of discovered concept art before you made that decision, knowing that you had to basically go back to square one and learn or relearn how to do art or think about art? How long of like a decision-making process was that for you?
It was absolutely terrifying. First of all, because at that point I was already 30, and most people in that kind of online community were in their early 20s or even younger, which was endlessly terrifying. And they were all, well, most of them were based in either United States or in UK, where the industry was really booming. And I wasn't. I was at the time living in Switzerland, and there was pretty much nothing there. So not only did I have to try and kind of get to the level of all these super talented kids, but I also had to somehow find work, from the countries who were providing work while not being there. It was absolutely insane. And I did it without a shadow of doubt that I have to do it. I think that the emotional pull towards that was so enormously powerful that there was no choice but to do that for me emotionally, if you see what I mean. It was just a thing that I just had to do, and it felt completely right. I've only had that twice in my life. Once I had that with concept art, and the second time is when I met my wife. And it was just when you feel that things are exactly what they need to be, that's what it is. And I'm a very passionate guy. I do tend to listen to my heart far more often than I listen to my mind, which probably isn't the best idea always. But in the sort of career choices that I've made, it was It was, and I'm very glad for it, because it took me on a journey, and I'm still on that journey, which I would have never taken had I stayed in the comfort of a really well-paid job as a sort of senior effects, motion graphics artist, sort of young director type of guy in a really nice flat with a really nice car, circle of friends. I had everything, but I knew I had to kind of lose a bunch of these things and then get what I really want. And I've realized eventually the only thing that matters really is to do what you really, 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 really want to do. And the life takes care of the rest somehow. And it's logical. It's not some hippie kind of esoteric theory. It's actually, there's logic in that. If you're really, really, really interested in something, there's a very good chance you'll be excellent at that. Or at least you'll be good enough to become a professional in that area, whatever that is. And when you're a professional and you're passionate about things that you do, you constantly progress, because if you keep your interest active, you keep your progress active. I'm a firm believer that progress and development is directly linked to the interest, human interest. Evolution is based on our interest. We were curious about the environment, so we climbed down from trees. We were curious about other environments, so we started exploring. So that's how we evolved as a species. And I think it's just deeply rooted in our nature. So I think interest is really one of the most powerful driving forces that we can have. And I'm using it. I'm listening to it very carefully whenever that deep, deep voice in me, which is often silent. It's not a screaming voice. It's a very deep, guttural voice, but it's the most important voice you can have, I think. And I'm always very careful to listen to it. That's why I left games, because I felt there's more for me to explore in films. Working as an illustrator designer in films is a slightly different discipline. There's a whole load of new challenges and kind of parameters that you face working in films. And then I left working as a concept artist and decided, well, I want to go kind of back to directing, but with all these tools that I've equipped myself with for the last 10, 15 years. And that has been just an incredible journey, but it has a lot to do with listening to that quiet, deep, guttural voice in you.
Yeah, I always like to say that when you get nervous farts about something, when it really like kind of churns your stomach and like you kind of feel like it's something you're about to do, like getting on a roller coaster or like that kind of feeling, that means like you're probably on the right path, or like that's something you need to go to, and to really trust that instinct. And I agree with you. I think human beings are like superhuman. Like we have like these superpowers, and if you put us in any situation, we're gonna like make the best out of it or find a way to survive. So I think you're absolutely right that the interest or the passion that you have in something is the thing that kind of brings you that extra energy to continue that as like a lifelong pursuit. So you can put as long as you follow that kind of gut churn, like that you were talking about, that instinct that you have, that passion that you have for something, I think you're going to be okay. Even if it doesn't seem like it, and even if you're in an okay situation financially, that stuff doesn't matter. Like you said, the most important thing is to do what interests you or what you're passionate about.
Yeah. My good friend Min Yang, who is possibly one of the best concept artists in the world, but is strangely not so popular, not so well known. And he and I are really good friends. He said to me when I was freaking out, I was not popular enough, I was not good enough, I was not successful enough in my head. And I was far more concerned with the fact that I wasn't getting the kind of credits in the so-called online community, and that I wasn't popular. And I was really upset about that, because I thought, I'm putting all this work and I'm really practicing. And he told me, why are you worried? What's that got to do with what you're doing? And it took me by surprise a little. And he was like, all you need to do is just be good as you can, and all the rest will sort itself out. Meaning, the priorities that I had, which I see all the kind of up and coming artists have, priorities are kind of focused on popularity and acknowledgement and wrong values, really wrong values, wrong targets. Where they should be, in my opinion, is really focusing on what you're actually interested in doing and what you really want to achieve with that work. And if you do, everything sorts itself out.
Right. Oftentimes we create one good thing or two good things and we start to promote ourselves and put ourselves out there, and so it very quickly becomes a numbers game, and you're almost set up for failure right away because it's so hard to build an audience and all that stuff that comes with promoting yourself. And then that becomes the focus. And often when that becomes the focus, it's like this disappointing feeling all the time because you're not getting a job from what you're doing, or you're not getting the accolades that you think you should be getting. And then that inevitably trickles back into your creative process when you're doing that thing. And then it just goes back and forth. And the thing that you're creating doesn't come from that passion anymore. It comes from what do people want to see, or how can I make myself look better? Or, it just gets icky. And it's so hard to kind of separate those two things. But I think your friend was right. I think that all you have to do is create the thing for yourself as best as you can and for your own enjoyment. And then all that other stuff comes later.
I mean, I often ask sort of slightly junior people, when I hear them kind of obsessing about these things, I often ask them, what do you want to be, popular or successful? Like, what would you prefer to be, really famous or really, really successful? And there's a big difference between the two. Really successful, someone who can achieve things, someone who's well respected in the community, doesn't necessarily need to be someone who's hugely popular. You can take any analogy, music, films, whatever you want, any kind of genre, any industry, and it applies across every one of them. Usually the real good people aren't necessarily the loudest ones. They're not necessarily shouting, screaming for attention. But that's, I think we're still maturing with the fact that all of us now suddenly have a stage, which is social media, and we can, like in Life of Brian, the Monty Python film, we can all now stand on a pedestal and then shout and scream about the next Messiah. But really, you want to be Brian. You want to be Brian. You want to get on with your life, do your thing. That's what you really want to do, and things will happen.
Right. And not everybody's fit to be on that pedestal. Not everybody's, even if they think that they're ready to be like kind of in the public spotlight or, whatever on social media, a lot of people aren't very well equipped to do that emotionally, because you realize that there's going to be a back and forth dialogue and suddenly you have to defend yourself and all this stuff. So it's not always the best for everyone.
That's a whole big topic in itself.
Yeah. Well, let's move on from that and let's talk about Kiss Me First. And so how did that I know you were putting yourself out there and kind of presenting yourself from all of your different walks of life from that point, and kind of packaging yourself as a potential director, animation director. So how did that come to be?
Well, the really crazy thing, and the more I think about it, the more annoyed I get about it. The crazy thing is, if I was a writer, if I was an actor, even if I was a producer, people wouldn't question that. People wouldn't, it's perfectly acceptable for an actor or a writer or even a producer to kind of take the charge, take the lead, become a director or a showrunner. And fairly so, they should be. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. But for some reason, if you are a visual artist in a sense that you're like an illustrator, a painter, there is a bit of kind of disconnect and disbelief that you're capable of doing the job. But if you think about it, concept art or for example, storyboarding is probably the closest thing to actual directing that you can get. It is, in my opinion, it is directing. You're taking a script, you're taking ideas and turning them into images, which is exactly the job of a director. That's probably the number one
Right.
responsibility of director, to turn script into images, right?
Right.
And there is still that sort of old school, well, you haven't worked with actors or you haven't done this. I have actually I've played in a theater for about a year, to my embarrassment.
Nice.
Just to get sort of a sense. I had like literally a 30-second appearance on the stage during this year, but
Hey, congrats.
it was, now every time we would come in, I would just have like my 30 seconds, then I would fuck off. But I kind of co-directed that play, and I art directed the play. I played in it. I spent a year with my really good friends, best friends, doing that, kind of touring from one village to another. It was bloody ridiculous. But what I'm trying to say is there is an assumption, because you are a concept artist or an illustrator or a very visual person, that you won't be able to make visuals out of a story. And I think that's quite insane. I had to fight that quite a lot. I didn't fight it. I just had to work very hard to make myself trustworthy and to allow people to believe me that I can do the job. But once people started seeing that, oh, okay, it's fine, then everyone relaxed, and it was a much easier thing to do, and we became all friends. But it's a very difficult step to make, because you're kind of stepping up in your career, not just like one level, but like 20 levels above you. And from, being a guy that is kind of someone taking feedback notes from 5-6 layers above, to actually being someone calling the shots to a degree, is a very big progress in career, and very rapid kind of promotion, if you see what I mean. But that didn't scare me at all, because I felt the first thing I did was I surrounded myself with some of the best concept artists in the industry who happened to be my friends and colleagues. And I told them, look, guys, you know what I do. I know what you do. Let's play this flat. I don't want to pretend I'm a director. I'm going to be your friend and colleague, and I'm going to be a navigation system. I will make sure that we're all driving towards a destination, but the style of the driving and the pathway you take is entirely up to you. You will be in charge of a lot of things. And I gave them the ownership over their work to a great extent, just because I believed, as much as I want to control them, especially being a concept artist myself, really trust them and let them own their work. And I did my best to do that all throughout the project, not just with concept artists, but also everyone else, obviously. And that was a good idea, because there was a different sense of loyalty. It wasn't even a loyalty. It was kind of brotherhood for a while that I wouldn't have expected. But it was, we were all in trenches. I was concepting myself. I didn't just, sit around and just, look at their work. I was with them. I was drawing, painting, designing all the time, while doing everything else as well. So yeah, that's the first thing I did. And then being very honest about the fact that I haven't directed animation before. I've directed live action. I've directed some silly, stupid live action before, but I've never directed animation. And I told everyone, look, I'm just going to need a little bit of hand-holding through the process to know what is layout, actual animation part of the job. What's lighting? What does it actually mean in the animation? And these are very, very, very important things. So that was good. And throughout the process as well, I was constantly learning, because I didn't really know all that much about really, difficult technical terminology of directing. And every day was, a couple of hours of learning, and then working for about 10, 11 hours, and then another couple of hours of learning when I get home. So that was 2 years of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and 2 years is a long time, and surely there must have been some times where you're thinking, oh, well, maybe the whole stigma we were talking about before of like, oh, well, actors do this, and who am I to do this? That's what other people said. Did that kind of thought process ever kind of infiltrate its way into your head and thinking, oh, they're right, or like maybe I'm not cut out for this?
I mean, this would be a great opportunity to say that I was confident, I knew what I was doing, and that I kind of power through, but just wouldn't be true. I had levels of self-doubt that I didn't even know I had. I'm normally a very, very confident person. I have quite a bit of arrogance in me, actually. But when you really face your limits, and no one's to blame for it, it's just literally your limits, it's quite defeating. It's really defeating. And I've had nights where I literally stared at my ceiling and cried. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. Literally just, not being able to sleep, looking at my ceiling and just literally crying, just because I didn't know how to solve a problem, how to solve a situation, how to communicate certain things, how to make things work, especially, animation being so bloody difficult and complex. There were so many moments. And obviously, as you say, the first thing that comes to mind is, yeah, of course they were right. I'm absolutely not capable of doing that. Everyone was right. Everyone was right to doubt me. But somehow I managed to wrestle my way through these difficult moments. And I'm glad I did, because I found a new strength in me, not just creatively, but also as a person. And mostly because I started practicing mindfulness. That helped a lot.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I think that that's a feeling that a lot of people get, is that they just want to, like, there's a huge problem or a huge self-doubt and they just want to cry. And whether they actually cry or not, I've been there before too. And it's just like, this problem's so big, and how did I get myself into this situation? Can I really get through it? You just want to just kind of break down. And I think that's actually, like, that vision of putting yourself in that situation is something that holds people back from jumping into something that they don't know how to do. And I think that what you did is essentially one of the hardest things to do, is to put yourself in that situation where you're going to be facing self-doubt. You're going to have to learn stuff, which is a very painful thing to do, or to even admit that you need to, like, learn how to do stuff. But to do it for 2 years on a massive project, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Would you have any advice then for people? Because, like I said, you did do something kind of superhuman. You put yourself in that situation and found a way to get out of it unscathed, and not only unscathed, but, a better person and creating something amazing. Would you have any advice for people that maybe are on the edge of doing something that they're scared of, or that they know that they have to completely change their lives, or learn a whole bunch of stuff, or lead people?
Sure. One word: mindfulness. Honestly, mindfulness. Get yourself one of those apps. Start practicing like 3-5 minutes a day, and then eventually increase to, I don't know, 10 minutes, 20, however you can do. But that is literally, we're now in the same spot that we were maybe 20, 30 years ago actually, or more, when people started jogging. And when people first started jogging, if you'd see a jogger on the street, people go like, why is this person running? What are they running from? No one could understand that, because people didn't know the benefits of keeping yourself healthy and fit, especially running does something too. And mindfulness is like the next jogging. It's literally jogging for your brain. I'm saying this, I'm such an anti-esoteric kind of, I'm really not your hippie, if you see what I mean. I'm allergic to that sort of stigma of, do you know what I mean? That specific kind of thing. Where I'm so not like that. Not culturally, my cultural background's not like that. My personality is not like that. I'm nothing like that. And once this was explained to me in the right way, what this is, and it's just basically a very simple series of breathing exercises while trying to concentrate on breathing and not getting distracted. And actually getting distracted is good, because you bring your mind back to breathing. That act of bringing your mind back to breathing is physically changing your brain. It's called neuroplasticity. And it's an incredible discovery that we're just starting to uncover. Well, in the last 10 or 15 years, that's kind of been the new thing, the next big thing. And what I noticed through doing mindfulness is not not only do you get a little bit calmer and kind of more composed and you're not freaking out as much, your attention to detail, your focus, inspiration, everything goes up. Everything is increased. Just because you're able to kind of distance yourself a little bit from your thoughts, and you can kind of categorize between thoughts and emotions, and it doesn't just overwhelm you. When we're under stress, we're slaves of our emotions. We just get kind of overrun by emotions and kind of ruminating thoughts. This is a game changer for me, and for many people that I know, I've recommended, and everyone's benefiting. So yeah, try doing mindfulness meditation. It's absolutely amazing, and do it in small steps. Do like 2 or 3 minutes a day. Get yourself an app. There's a mindfulness and a Headspace, I think they're called. I really, really recommend that.
And when did you start doing this mindfulness practice?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Perfect.
But think about it. I managed to do the biggest, most complicated, most challenging gig of my life. And I also, at the same time, I wrote a book and illustrated a book.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I made a figure drawing for concept artists, which is a book literally targeted for concept artists. I did that while being the busiest I've ever been in my life. It just created space in my head. It's very hard to explain.
So when did you get the idea to do that book, and when did you decide it was a good idea to like add this thing on to your already very busy schedule?
Well, I committed to the book just before I started the gig.
Gotcha.
And the whole idea came about because I was occasionally, I don't know if you're familiar with industry workshops. My good friends, Levi Petfi, Daniel Matthews, Alex Heath, and Richard Burns, they run these phenomenal workshops in London, and I think 4 or 5 now have been done every summer. It's a big event, and on these events, I give a sort of like a life drawing lecture. And because I have a very specific way of teaching life drawing, which is based on actually Californian methods, people quite liked it. And I started talking to the publisher, 3D Total, and I said, why don't we make this into a book? And we committed to that. And then I got the gig, the Kiss Me First gig. And
oops.
Yeah, I was gonna cancel it originally, but somehow it not only became not a chore, it became like a really nice thing to remind me why I'm doing what I'm doing and what the core skill that I have actually is, which is drawing. Being a director now, I mean, it sounds so pretentious when I say it. It's very hard for me to even say this, but I am on paper. Yeah. Officially, I am now. Right. But the one thing that really stood out for me in the process was the advantage of being able to sketch. And I don't mean, draw really well or make really interesting, beautiful images. No, just the ability to communicate through drawing is absolutely invaluable. And I kind of totally realized that this is the biggest tool I have on my belt, or the biggest sword that I have when I'm entering any of these battles, because it is one of the earliest languages we have, and it's one of the most clear languages we have. And it solves so many problems in simple situations when you just have to explain something to someone and you just kind of scribble. I had this big sort of layout pad and some fat markers. So I can't go into details. I purposely didn't want a pencil or something small or fine, but literally thick black marker and a layout pad, so that it's just about the idea and not me being a bloody illustrator. And that alone has helped me so much for the last 2 years. And not just in the initial phase of concepting and storyboarding, all the way through to the end, literally to the very end, when we were then creating the title sequences. It was generating quick ideas. It's kind of like a self-dialogue between me and the paper, where I just kind of scribbling stuff very roughly, and I don't worry about the quality, proportions, light, perspective, all of these things. That it's just about the idea, and it's just about design. It's just about the context. And it's really magic just how much you get from being able to sketch. So that's another advice, keep drawing because it's the best skill you can have, honestly.
Right, to turn it into kind of like an appendage, like a tool that's always at your disposal, as opposed to like this big idea that is going to hold you back where you have to worry about, oh, what's this going to look like? Is this a good idea? Just something that you can kind of take the worry out, and it's just like a part of you that you can put out there.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a huge honor and privilege a couple of weeks ago to meet Sir Ridley Scott in person.
Oh, wow.
And I spent the whole morning with him because I'm probably going to be doing some work with him. And apart from the fact that he just blew my mind. I mean, the man is, my voice is shaking just saying this. He is what he is. And he totally deserves all the praise and all the fandom and everything that we like about his work. He totally deserves it. Honestly, this man, and he's so switched on and he's so artistic. He knows more about art than I do. He knows more about light and color than I do. He is drawing at least as good as I do. I mean, the guy, and on top of all of that, he spent about an hour. He stopped talking to anyone else, just talked to me and gave me a directing masterclass for about an hour straight. Just told me, this is how you work with actors, this is how you work with writers, this is how you work with... I couldn't believe... when the meeting was finished, I walked out and I was just like, what the fuck just happened?
That's awesome.
But the thing that really stood out for me is that he told me that, keep drawing, never stop drawing. And he told me he's still drawing everything he does. The film that he just did and the way he replaced Kevin Spacey due to allegations.
Right.
He just played with Christopher Plummer. And he explained me how, because he knows as he said, geometry of the scenes, which are constructed through his hand-drawn storyboards. And because he's drawn these scenes, he knows how to repeat the scene months later or however later with a completely different actor. They're exactly the same thing.
Right.
How amazing. What a wonderful testament to be an artist, to love drawing, to embrace your skill coming from someone like Sir Ridley Scott. I mean, right? Just amazing.
Just next level shit.
Yes.
Wow, that's so cool. I assume you can't talk about what you might be doing with him?
I'm afraid not. I really wish I could, but I'm really,
Well, we'll have you back on at some point. Well, let's talk about what you can talk about, which is Kiss Me First. Tell us a little bit about the actual story and kind of what people can expect from it.
So it's a very new type of TV show, I would say. It's a very original format of the TV show in the way that it's actually a live action animation hybrid. But animation is not utilized as it has been for the past 50 years in the modern Western society, which is basically animation has been used as a platform, as a genre, as a kid's genre. Due to phenomenal work of Disney and all the big animation studios. But what it's done is it put animation into this corner that is slightly taken less seriously than say, live action filmmaking. So what we did here is we set off to do very serious, gripping drama that handles incredibly contemporary themes like difficulties of social media, difficulties of gaming, the immersiveness of the games versus real lives, how much people spend in their real lives versus, their virtual lives, things that happen in games or online in general. We tackled some really serious issues that are very kind of hot topics right now. And we picked animation to do that. And I was very lucky and very privileged to be given the task of directing animation for that. And our showrunner, Brian Owsley, told me, look, this is really completely and utterly relying on the success of the dialogue scenes, of the small, intimate, personal moments between the characters. If we don't get that right, we failed. And the whole show, completely, everything has failed. And as you probably know, animation likes explosions, it likes sci-fi, it likes fast-paced action, but it doesn't really like these quiet moments. It doesn't like natural, organic environments. And the thing that it likes the least is facial performances, facial animation, dialogue scenes. And that was my main goal, to get believable facial animations in an organic environment. And it's that was a really big responsibility, a really, really, really big task. But I thought we were going to approach it in a clever way. We weren't the size of Disney or ILM, far from it. We didn't have time or resources that these guys have. And even those guys really struggle with that really difficult, elusive topic of facial animation. So the first thing I did is I looked at it the way that my biggest heroes, art heroes, which are Leyendecker, J.C. Leyendecker, and Dean Cornwell, and these guys, early illustrators from the 20th century, the way they approached human faces and human expressions was through this stylized realism. So it wasn't completely out of whack. It was still very realistic. If you look at any piece that Leyendecker has done, or Norman Rockwell, they're still very realistic, but at the same time, they're also quite stylized. And I've spent years studying these illustrators and just trying to figure out the algorithm, if you want, in their head, how they would pick and choose certain features and how they would stretch it and increase this, proportions or decrease the proportions. And I tried to apply that in this case, and also making a very clear statement that I'm not trying to do realistic humans. We could have just scanned the actors and had perfect copies of realistic humans. But the thing is that just drives you straight towards the uncanny valley, because no one's figured it out yet. We haven't figured it out yet.
The uncanny valley being?
The uncanny valley is the shortest description of that is, if you start from, say, South Park, right? And you're seeing an inanimate object with human characteristics. And then the more realistic you get, so say from South Park, you go to Simpsons, you go from Simpsons to, say, Incredibles. And then from the Incredibles, it's you kind of climbing up this kind of realism level. And the higher you go, the closer you get to the realism, like almost photoreal, the more and the steeper it gets to this so-called valley, because what happens is at one point, say from the level of stylization that you find in, for example, The Incredibles, when things start looking quite realistic, you stop seeing an inanimate object with humanistic features. You start seeing a human with dysfunctional features. Right. You start seeing a flawed human instead of an inanimate object with human features. So you can literally animate a rock. You can animate water. You can animate a pillow and give it a personality, give it a lot of character. I don't know if you watched Seth MacFarlane's what's it called, The Orville. Phenomenal. There's a character which is like a jelly character, and it's one of the most charismatic characters on the show. But if you have a completely realistic person, perfectly motion captured, and they speak, and especially if it's a close-up, you start immediately believing it's a real person, and then every now and then you're triggered by the disbelief. And those triggers, they really start annoying you. Yeah.
And the eyes, too, are really difficult.
Eyes, smiles, smiles tend to be horribly difficult.
Yeah.
No one seems to figure that yet. I mean, it's incredibly complex. And mind you, I studied anatomy for 25 years. I know pretty much almost every muscle in the head, and I know how they move. I know that there's sliding, so-called sliding, in between layers of fat and fascia and all these sorts. I'm really informed, and yet once you get to animation and once you get to facial animation, the games change. People can figure that out. I mean, just hats off to them. And I haven't really found anyone who's completely figured it out yet. But we approached it in a way, okay, let's make sure, first of all, we don't want them to look like perfectly realistic humans. They need to look like video game avatars. Not just for the reasons that I just mentioned, but also I do like stylization. I do want to make sure this is a video game. When they enter this video game, it needs to look and feel like a video game, like a very beautiful video game, but still a video game. And then also the way we approach this, I mean, we did use motion capture, but even though you get fantastically accurate data, every twitch in your face is captured. Once you apply that to a CG model, something happens, whatever it is, and it doesn't just quite sit right. There's things being lost in translation, I guess. Mm-hmm. And that's why I really want to give a shout out to animators at Axis and everyone involved at Axis Animation, the whole team, the whole CG team, who have tackled this problem with artistry rather than manpower or technology, but just really looking at each segment and trying to figure out what is it that we do. So I would talk to Brian, the showrunner, and Mel, executive producer as well, and I would ask them, so what is the emotional intent of this character? What is this character feeling in this very moment? And then I would then talk to my animators, who would then act as my actors, basically. And I would tell them, okay, you know what? We're going to have to scrap most of this motion capture data. We're going to have to start from scratch. And this is what this character feels like. They're in this moment, they're annoyed, but there's something cooking in their mind. And this is how I would brief my animators through an emotional brief, a state of emotional kind of condition that the character is in. And then we would try to tackle that emotional state of the character rather than move lip up a little bit and move jaw a little bit. We did that as well, but it was more important to get the emotional state and the kind of empathetic point in the character. And we did that across the show. And, I think, some are more successful than others, but I think I'm personally very proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks beautiful. I only watched, all I could find was one 30-second trailer. Netflix tends to keep things under wraps. But when is it released?
Netflix should be in May. If you're lucky enough to be in UK, it's being released on 2nd of April, which is why we can see longer trailers here, I guess. But it should come out on Netflix in, I'm getting a panic attack every time, 164 countries, all at once, all episodes. Honestly, I'm like, that's why I start coughing and I start getting panicky. 164 countries, and it's one of their kind of bigger shows. So as you can tell, my voice, it's a very scary thing. I've never been in this situation before. I mean, I've had games releases before and I've had film release, but this is so, I've had so much responsibility in this, so it's quite scary.
Yeah, I imagine that a release on Netflix is a terrifying thing for the people that made that project, but it's the best thing as a consumer. It's the coolest thing to have it all available to you right away so you can binge on it when you do get a good thing. I just sink my teeth into it and just go with it, and I can't wait to experience it myself.
What's your favorite show at the moment on Netflix?
The favorite show on Netflix or of all time?
No, on Netflix, just currently.
So my wife and I are almost finished Altered Carbon.
Right. I need to get into that.
Pretty good show. Some of the same futuristic elements probably of Kiss Me First with the kind of VR experience. Very cool. But I like basically everything Netflix puts out. There's only been a couple things that I haven't liked. So they always they pick good projects and they just release them. They know what they're doing. So that's why I can't wait to watch Kiss Me First.
I mean, just to give you an idea, I mean, it's such an amazing time we're living in, really. I've never been able to even see a sort of studio execs while I was working either in films or games. I mean, these are sort of like ghostly creatures that you know exist, but you never see them, let alone talk to them.
Right.
I've talked to Larry Tans, who's vice president of Netflix, several times, and he was so friendly. It was so nice. Like we actually Skyped at one point. It was just, it's such an informal but loving and supporting environment. And the notes were always just the most positive notes and just most encouraging. Just go for it, go for it, go for it. And I've never experienced that ever with any sort of client before. It's just incredible. It's amazing. You generally not believe it.
Well, and I think I think that artists should be allowed to do whatever they do best and not have that kind of control from somebody who doesn't really understand it. And I think that's, from what I have heard about Netflix, they kind of they fund the project and they give very minimal notes. And I know HBO does that too. They just trust the people that are working on the project to do the best, you know what I mean? And they don't put their finger on, you can't say this, you can't do this, or we want it to go this way. That is a quick way to destroy a project that a lot of people are working on. So I think when you give artists artistic freedom, that's what they're supposed to be able to do, and that's where they flourish. So that's why I love Netflix, and I think everything that's come out on Netflix is just A+ in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they really know what they're doing. And I mean, just to kind of add to that, I mean, it's not like they're detached from what you're doing. They're very, very, very tuned in at everything you do. They're not just like, oh, whatever, you just go ahead and do whatever you want. They're completely on top of it, but in a way that is just supportive and most encouraging. And just, if there's a feedback, it's always a good kind of feedback. It's a kind of feedback you want to hear, really. And that was probably one of the most shocking things for me working on the show, compared to some of my previous experiences, obviously, where you're not even allowed to think for yourself, let alone to raise your voice and kind of raise your opinion. People are still in denial, I think, a little, but they're here and they're here to stay. Whether, I mean, if it's always going to be Netflix or not, I don't know, but that is the format that we're currently living in. My wife practically never watches TV, ever. She's on her iPad, Netflix and YouTube, and that's it. Netflix, YouTube, that's what she watches, and that's that's most of what people do these days. So they have taken over. It's just going to take a little bit of time for people to accept it, I think.
To acceptance.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Kahn, this has been awesome. I can't wait for the show and everything, but it is time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
You know what? Wow, what a noble thing to do of you. I appreciate this. It's not just a podcast that, it's a good idea. Well, listen, if I was to say anything, I think the fear factor is the biggest obstacle for all of us. And if I kind of somehow digitally could reach out and, put my hand on everyone's shoulder listening to this and do my Luke Skywalker kind of thing, I think don't be afraid of your fears. Fears are normal, and don't run away from things. I'm not saying be brave, because I think that's a terrible advice, but I'm saying work with your fear, get into mindfulness, sort things out from your past, take therapy, take whatever it needs to get you to a place where you as a human come first, and then artist, and then whatever. It's incredibly important to sort yourself out first. I mean, and if I could do it, I mean, listen, I was in a war in the 90s. I was a war refugee for years. I was beaten up. People were shooting at me and my family. I was literally running between the snipers, and then immigrated to a country where I wasn't welcome. I could barely get into a school. Everything was always against me. And even, as you probably heard, even when I took this gig as a director, no one really thought that I'm supposed to do that. But here I am. And I think the lesson from it is, if I can do it, if I could do it, I think anyone can. I'm a very fragile person with anxiety issues, with PTSD, with very difficult past, and somehow it's possible for someone like me to find my place in a wonderful career that I think anyone can have. So face your fears, sort yourself out as a person first, because that's what matters most. And then you'll see that all you need to do is look inwards and not outwards. You don't need to look at other people. You've already got the best person that you need, and that's you. And I think that's all I have to say.
Excellent, man. Yeah, super advice. And just thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your journey, and for sharing what you've been up to the past 2 years. Congratulations as well. You know, we were talking before about how you feel like this is like finally like kind of everything coming together, and you're able to kind of showcase all of the different kind of journeys that you've been down and everything that you've learned and put it all into one. So congratulations to you for finding that project, and I can't wait to check it out.
Thank you so much, and thanks very much for having me. I mean, it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
That's been my pleasure as well. Kahn, thanks again.
Thank you so much, and speak to you soon.
A huge thank you once again to Kahn for coming on the show. Super insightful look into what he does, and I am so excited to check out Kiss Me First on Netflix. Unfortunately, I'm in the US, so I have to wait another month. But for those of you in the UK or that get Channel 4, the first episode has already aired by the time you've listened to this, so definitely check that out. And I'll be sure to remind the rest of the world once I've watched that. I'm sure it's going to be great, or at least the animation is going to be amazing. And I also watched All the Money in the World, that Ridley Scott film that Kahn had mentioned in the episode. And watching it after speaking with Kahn was such a really eye-opening experience. And he's right. There is such a power in being able to communicate through art. It is such a skill to be able to do, whether it's through visual art, through drawing, through writing, through photography, to be able to communicate to other people in ways that other people can't, or to be able to communicate to them in a way that lets their own mind wander. That is an excellent skill to have. And if you have that, keep pushing it and keep practicing so you can get better and better. But the main point that I wanted to bring up from this episode was that idea of mindfulness. When I asked Kahn how he was able to get through those 2 years, and not only get through those 2 years, but add another major project on top of that, his answer right away was mindfulness. And I actually was inspired enough to download Headspace for myself, and it has been a game changer so far. I, like many of you, I'm sure, am somewhat addicted to my phone. At least it is a part of my life, and I am constantly checking when I'm getting notifications. So I think that was one of the main things that really helped me to get back into a mindfulness practice. I've tried other forms of meditation before, but this is definitely helping me, because just like those emails that I'm supposed to be reading, just like sports scores or whatever other push notifications I'm getting throughout the day, it's good to get that one little notification that tells you it's time to meditate today. It's time to take 10 minutes out of your time to get back to you, to get back to Youngman, to get back to that base level of existence where you can just be calm and without those notifications for a few minutes. And I'm also a geek for stats, and it tells me that I've meditated so many minutes per day. I'm having a long streak of days. I don't know, that's helped me a lot to not only have those notifications, but also have those stats. A little bit something more than just that voice in my head that's telling me, you know, you should get to your meditation. You should take a little bit of time out of your day to get back to you. It's useful to have that in your back pocket, so to speak. So I would definitely recommend Headspace. And I'm also interested to see if any of you have used a mindfulness app, or if you have used any other type of mindfulness practice. So we're going to start that discussion in the Facebook group. Head to yourcreativepush.com/mindfulness. And that will take you right to the Facebook post for that discussion topic. Just because Headspace is working for me, it doesn't mean that that's the only thing that works. So if you are also looking to increase your mindfulness and want to see what has worked for other listeners of Your Creative Push, definitely head there, yourcreativepush.com/mindfulness. On our next episode, we have Amy Dressner. Amy is a former professional stand-up comic, and she has been the sole official columnist for the online addiction and recovery magazine, thefix.com, and she has just written her first book, My Fair Junkie, a memoir of getting dirty and staying clean. I read this thing, and it is funny, but it is also heartbreaking, and it is brutally honest. And she comes on the show next week to talk about not just her journey through drug, alcohol, and sex addictions, but also the process of putting it all down on paper and being an open book for her readers so that she can hopefully help somebody else if they are struggling through the same thing. If you want to check out Amy before the show, you can head to her website at amydressner.com, or we'll have that linked up at today's show notes page, along with everything we talked about with Kahn, including his book and links to Headspace and mindfulness apps at yourcreativepush.com/284. But that is all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will be here for you next week if you need the push again. Go and get some amazing work done. I love you all so much, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.